Hello and welcome. Welcome to an Omega conversation with two extraordinary teachers. My name is Michael Kraft, and on behalf of the Omega staff and community, we're very glad to be able to do this conversation with Majora Carter and Seane Corn entitled Rethinking and Regenerating Community. This is in honor of Majora's new book, Reclaiming Community. And there will be a book giveaway. Check the chat box, check the chat on the side for that. But before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the world and all of us have been through an extraordinary 2 years with many challenges and many transitions. That includes Omega, and we are very grateful to still be here, hopefully wiser and of greater service than ever before. But we cannot continue to succeed without your continued support. So, in addition to the generosity of our great teachers, we do these events based on your contributions, and we hope that you will visit eomega.org and check out our membership to be part of our growing community. We will be doing Q&A, and when we do that, I'd like you to put your questions in the chat or go to the reactions box at the toolbar at the bottom and click on Raise Hand. Now, without any further ado, it's a great pleasure to introduce our speakers. Majora Carter is an urban revitalization strategy consultant, a MacArthur Fellow, and a Peabody Award-winning broadcaster. She's responsible for creating numerous economic development and green infrastructure projects, and she serves as Senior Program Director for Community Regeneration at Groundswell. Majora's new book is Reclaiming Community. You don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one. What a wonderful blessing that is. Seane Corn is an internationally acclaimed yoga teacher and public speaker known for her passionate global activism. A co-founder of Off the Mat Into the World, she has been named Yoga Ambassador for Youth AIDS. She has co-funded the Global Save a Challenge, and she is author of Revolution of the Soul, a wonderful book as well. It's my great pleasure to welcome these two speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. And I want to take a moment first. Hi, Majora. I'm so happy to see you and to know that you're here. But I want to take a moment just to thank all of you for being here. I'm on gallery right now, so I'm just looking at your names and your faces. And I'm really grateful for all of you to taking the time out of your day to be a part of this very important conversation. Majora, I want to congratulate you for the release of this book. And I believe today is the launch date. Is that true?
No, it was February 1st, literally.
Well, I spent the last 3 days just immersed in this book. And what was really interesting to me, Majora, is that I have known you as a community activist. I have known you as a public speaker, as someone who has been deeply committed to real estate development. You are a radio host. There's so many hats that you have worn over these years. You're a scholar. I had to actually check to see if this was your first book, because it is so well written, and the story, the way in which you engaged personal narrative with actionables and history. And it's a love story to the Bronx. It's a love story to community and your family. It's very, very personal. And it was meaningful to me as someone who has been an activist, who has worked in this world and has felt that the pushback can often come from people who are, you think are on your own team or even within your own community. And you share all of that with so much humility and courage as a part of the teachable. And so I was so surprised when I checked, I Googled, I was like, this can't be your first book. And it is. And so I'm really quite in awe at the way in which, with so much consistent expertise and competence, which I know is hard-earned, because I'm sure you fake it till you make it, but you continually show up for yourself and for your community to, as you mentioned in the book, you talk about the canary in the coal mine, and I forget the context of it. But this morning when I was thinking about it, I thought, you're the canary in the coal mine. You're the one who is out there doing the work and then saying like, hey guys, here's what it looks like. Here are the challenges. Here's the pathway. I'll do it first so that I can figure out like all the really crazy, weird stuff. And then give you an opportunity so you don't have to make those same mistakes. So I want to acknowledge your efforts and your talent and your gifts and encourage everyone who is on right now to get this book, to absorb it, whether you're just vaguely interested in understanding more about community development and reclaiming your community and revitalization of your community, or you're an activist who wants to understand more about the methodologies that has made your work so successful. So I just wanted to start there, Majora, and thank you and welcome you.
Oh, wow. I don't even know what to say. And in part because I don't think I ever really thought of myself as the canary in that coal mine, but I think on some level I have been, and I don't think it hit me until you said it. Wow, I don't know why that touched me the way that it did, but it just did. And because yes, it has been painful at times. Like, oh yeah, that's me. I'm dying over here. But because I always thought of it more like, this is kind of like my ministry. This is my work, and this is what I love doing. And, if anything, I thought of it more as like, this is like, I'm a scientist and a researcher, and and so if anything, this is like my research and development, laboratory. And of course I'm going to be my first subject, because what else I can like inject myself with all sorts of stuff and, and see how it plays. But it has been a really interesting road. But it really does come out of feeling like this, coming from this space where there was so, no one rises to low expectations. And so many of our communities, in particular, low status communities, which are the ones that I am most passionate about, because they are the ones, that folks go, there's inequality is just assumed in those areas. And I'm like, no, and I'm coming to you literally from the original land of the Seane people, and up until just fairly recently, when the remains of enslaved Africans were discovered here in my little section, the South Bronx right now, they were just, they were in unmarked graves. And so I come here listening to ancestors, feeling, God like working through me in order to support communities like mine. But it's been a really fascinating place to be. And it's just like, I just want to see, I don't want people to go through what I actually went through. Growing up in a place, that was forgotten and maligned at best, and recognizing that we actually have the power to create change and recover in ways that are beautiful and healing for our own communities.
So what I want to ask you, Majora, which I really feel like is the question that doesn't really get asked to community organizers or activists or people who genuinely are out there doing the work, but just how are you? How are you and how are your family doing? How is everything going for you?
I'm really good. I mean, well, actually, that's not entirely true. It's really hard because in addition to, there's like, I feel like I have like 6 different jobs. So like every project that we're working on still has to be done. And I also am working with an amazing organization called Groundswell, which is a solar equity organization. And I'm really working to try and, to use their media platform, or to develop a media platform to showcase all the great work that people like the folks that work at Groundswell and also folks around the country are doing to increase access to solar for low and moderate income people. But then I'm also got projects that I'm working on, actual physical projects that require, an enormous amount of time and energy and resources. And so it's always some of that going on. So it's like, sometimes I don't feel like I give myself enough time to kind of recharge and, dive into, my own spirituality that allows me to actually develop and grow and really gives me a sense of peace and rest. But for the most part, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm glad, because we need you thriving out there doing the work in a way that's sustainable, and also modeling that back. And believe me, I'm saying this as much to myself as to you. So it's not like I'm coming from a place of like, I got this down.
Yeah.
It's just something I keep asking myself. Like, I'm always surprised when someone says to me, like, how are you doing? And usually I'll just orient and say, here's what I'm doing,
Right.
but avoid that question.
Yes.
And because it's very loaded in so many different ways, personally, culturally, and in the profession that you're in. There's no room for fatigue. Because lives are at stake.
Yes.
So I just wanted just to ask that question and just to check in with you and get out of that habit of depersonalizing you or anyone who does that kind of work, and instead just kind of anchoring that.
And isn't it crazy that I did exactly what you said? Like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
This is, what do and what I don't do are the things that actually are, fulfilling and nurturing, of me. So that I need to clock that. Thank you.
I do too. Trust me. I'm doing this deliberately because these are the things that I do with myself. I wrote a gazillion questions, and I know we're not going to get to all of these, but the first question I want to ask, and I think that this is really in service to everybody, is for you to, what do you mean when you say reclaim your community? What does that mean?
So reclaiming our community literally means that the people that are in those communities, the ones that are usually developed by someone else, with in terms of their vision of what should happen there, that those aren't the people who should be working to develop the strategies and plans. It's literally what we to borrow a page from the business world, it's a talent retention strategy, where it's literally the people that are in a company that let's say the owner of the business hires to support the goals of that company, are the ones that you're hoping will actually see value in advancing that mission for health and well-being, with economic well-being of that company. It's the same thing for communities. If we recognize that the tools and the talent is already in our communities, then they're the ones who are actually going to lead to its recovery, period. So it's the people that are in our communities that are creating the kind of regenerative and beauty and power that we all need.
I'm going to swing back to that, because you said a word, talent retention, and that I want to get back to. But before I do, you speak in the book and in life. I watched your TED Talk again for the gazillionth time. And it was just so sweet also to rewatch it, because it's filmed in 2006. And that's a long time ago at this point. And I was feeling you and your bravery, your courage, this young woman standing on the stage. You got Al Gore on the, right there, and a sea of people. You make a pitch. I felt for you. I was like, man, that's scary. And look at her. She is just like, I'm going to flip my hair back and show up and just say the things. But so I listened to you talk about the effects of environmental injustice and inequity on the health of people of color, and how it keeps communities in a cycle of poverty. Can you explain a little bit more about this, and also how the pandemic has impacted your community and your efforts at this time?
So look, what the pandemic did was just, continue the same trajectory that low status communities have been on, since the birth of the country as we know it. If you're poorer and darker, you're going, like, the things that you experience are going to have, and more vulnerable, the experiences you have with anything, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's the economic crisis that goes on, we're going to experience it. So quite frankly, it's, people act like, oh, it's just this thing that happened once. It's like, no, it's been happening all the time. So let's just acknowledge that. So if anything, it made it even more, because it was so clear, like you saw, more people of color dying, not getting the access they needed, but all that stuff. It was just so striking. I think it made it easier to show, like, okay, let this work really does have to happen. That's really all it did for me. Because like I still had to get out there, and work with and to support people that, either couldn't get out or shouldn't be getting out. But then there were also the projects that I think as we come out of the pandemic, which I'm not sure we're ever really going to come out of it, but as we, as things start to move in a direction where we can actually create more opportunities outside for folks to participate in, and as we manage it, that's where I think this approach to talent retention comes in.
And the question, though, about environmental injustice.
Okay.
Yeah, on the health of people of color.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I'm also because that's such a strong theme in your book. And I think that that's important for people to really understand.
Yeah. So from there, from whether it was, the kind of, economic degradation that literally created the kind of environmental problems that we deal with, because it's all based on like, you can, whether you're extracting stuff from the earth or burning it, or storing it in particular ways, it's almost always the impacts will affect the poor, and more people of color. It's just the way that it works because it's politically vulnerable to do so. And so by creating those and by recognizing that is the truth, if you can work to create a much more sustainable way of doing business, of transforming communities, then yes, the environmental health of those communities will be improved as well. So it's for us, it's all part of the same puzzle. You can't, sustainably, just talk about one and not the other if you're going to try to really do some transformational, community development. Like you just can't have, you have to do them all. Otherwise, it's just not, as far as I'm concerned, you're just going to continue the status quo.
Majora, you used a term, and it's interesting because it's a new term for me, and I never heard it before. And in this context, and I think it would be important to kind of expand upon it, but you referred to communities often identified as underserved or underprivileged as low status. Mm-hmm. And as a white person with privilege, I thought I could never refer to a community as low status. And so it was interesting to check my own body. I reread again and again your description and where you got it from, and it made perfect sense. But I also thought I have to titrate that in my own body to figure out how, because I understand it. And I think that people would benefit from hearing your description because it makes perfect sense, and I felt my body tighten with it.
Yeah, no. And I get that. And that's why whenever I talk about it, it's just like, it's not about the actual status of the human being in front of you. It is literally about whether, how folks from inside and outside those communities view those places. And because they're places where inequality is simply assumed. Mm-hmm. And that is the truth. So it's like the inequality is a status quo. You see it in terms of healthcare outcomes or educational outcomes, how people are involved in the justice system. And there's this feeling from both the whether it's the nonprofit industrial complex or the government, even people inside, born and raised in those communities, that poverty is just a cultural attribute. It's always going to be that way, and that's how those neighborhoods should be treated. Period. Mm-hmm. Period. And it goes beyond race, actually, because and geography, because you can be from an inner city or a Native American reservation or a poor white, former, booming industrial town that used to have a lot of industry and don't anymore, because of the way that many parts of the capitalist system works. Like those jobs went overseas and nobody cared about y'all. Period. It's just that simple. So and I think it speaks to the fact that that's why there's so much brain drain in those communities, because that's the whole point. We're taught to measure success by how far we get away from those communities if you happen to be born and raised in them.
Thank you. Again, it makes perfect sense, but that I was like, I'm going to have to retrain myself to actually use that word, because it actually is very inclusive when you refer to it as that. Yes. As you said, it broadens the reach to a variety of different communities. You shared something in the book it's a metaphor that you used that really struck me about monocultures. The quote is something, the monocultures represent vulnerability, while diversity represents resiliency. I was almost going to read the whole paragraph because it really lends to, I think, everything that you're talking about, because you also talk about gentrification as being the prey. And this made a lot of sense to me when I looked at it, in that it like narrowed all the chatter down. And I thought, oh, a monoculture. And that within that, you talked about 3 types of real estate development. I would love for you to talk a little bit about what did you mean by monoculture?
Well, with regard to the way I referred to it in the book, concentrated poverty is often the result, the byproduct of the billions of dollars worth of philanthropic and even government spending that goes into those communities nationwide, where poverty is treated as a cultural attribute, but it's never meant to be solved. It's like one of those little wicked problems that doesn't really have a solution. So you just make life a little easier for the poor folks there. And then, but in fact, all you're really doing is concentrating the poverty that's already there and exacerbating all the things associated with it, from poor health outcomes, poor educational attainment, all those things. And, and I think more importantly, just creating a breeding ground for a lack of hope, and for the future of those communities. And now I totally forgot the second part of that question.
Well, because it leads to this idea of talent retention.
Oh, right.
You talk about that there are 3 types of real estate development.
Right. Got it.
Gentrification, poverty level economic maintenance, which you refer to as PLEM, I believe, and then talent retention.
Right.
And I think that's, I would love to hear you talk more about, or any one of them.
Right. So gentrification is, they think through the typical path that people often acknowledge. Is like developers come in, buy up property, and then, the poor folks are displaced. That's the one kind. And then the second kind is what we call poverty level economic maintenance, and PLEM, which sounds like phlegm because it is kind of gross. But basically there's money to be made, like whether it's health clinics and pharmacies, multi-billion-dollar economic engine in this country, but this based on the fact there's so many lifestyle conditions, diabetes, obesity in those same communities. So someone's making a profit, but it's not, the people they're not getting better. And you could look statistically at that. I'm not making that up. They're not getting better. And then of course, things like, very highly subsidized affordable housing. People like to think, oh, we need more affordable housing. And it's like the developers that do it are doing it because, they're really good people. It's like, no, they're doing it because there's huge development fees that are literally built into building that stuff, period. But when they're concentrating it in just the same neighborhoods, which is not the way that the regulations were originally written. They were supposed to build affordable housing in high opportunity areas because that's where there was more opportunity for people to go to better schools, get better healthcare, the whole shebang. But that has never really happened in this country. And you could add systemic racism, to that, because that's why it didn't happen. We can just be honest with ourselves. But the talent retention approach is really about how do we create more opportunities within our own communities to, one, identify the talent that's already there, acknowledge that it's there in the first place, and then identify it and give that talent reasons to recognize they don't have to move out of their neighborhoods to live in a better one, but that they can actually stay and reinvest emotionally, socially, and financially, and create like the kind of beautiful living and local economic cycles so that people feel like they're getting what they need and want and are inspired by in their own community, in essence, to create the kind of cycles that make those places feel like they're great places to live, so that we're the ones creating the opportunities for ourselves and keeping them there.
Mm-hmm. Which is, again, going back to the canary in the birdcage in the coal mine, that's exactly what you have been modeling. You grew up in this neighborhood. You literally live across the street from the house that you grew up in. Mm-hmm. Have invested in the neighborhood. You know your neighbors, and have been committed to using your skills and talents. I'm sure any organization, company across the entire world would have loved to have just scooped you up, paid you a lot of money, put you up in some home somewhere, and taken you away from that environment, and instead you opted to orient and go right directly back to your home and use your skills in that capacity. And that's what you're suggesting is how we reclaim our communities, how we reinvigorate the communities.
Right.
Who knows it better than you?
Yeah.
You know, you made out on some street 3 blocks away. Your mother, yelled for you to come into the house, 40, 50 years ago.
Almost.
You have history there that's personal. So who better than you?
Right.
And yet, and I found this very interesting in the book and very self-disclosing, you took a lot of hits when you chose to be very deliberate about the term self-gentrification, which I completely understand what you meant by it. And yet, other activists, people in your community took great offense to that. And I'm wondering about if you can explain how your talent retention strategy, do people just still see that as being self-gentrification? Are they not understanding this, how bringing your own talent back into the community benefits everybody?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about self-gentrification and why you took a hit?
Sure. So self-gentrification is a term. I did not create the term, but I heard it from the former president of a historically Black college called Johnson C. Smith University down in Charlotte, North Carolina. In the book, I explained like how he, after meeting him, he talked about this project where the university got involved with the local community, which was a very poor community in Charlotte, and they worked with financial institutions to create, developments, that were being developed by the people in that community. So they were literally reinvigorating and redeveloping the community on its own. But not everybody was involved in the process. So when they saw development, they assumed that somebody else was coming in to do it. And they immediately started yelling gentrification. And President Carter, that was his name, was just like, whoa, wait a second. No. Like, look who's doing it. Like, these are Black folks from this community, your neighbors. This is not gentrification. If anything, it's self-gentrification, because you're doing it for yourselves. And I was like, oh, well, that's fascinating. And I thought that was a really interesting idea. I didn't think there was anything particularly provocative about it. I just thought it's, we like nice things too. Straight up. That's all I thought. And I knew a lot of people did as well. However, it was the word, which I think people just focused on. Some people focused specifically just on the gentrification part. It was so triggering. It was so triggering that people just could not get past it. And some absolutely were so triggered by it. I mean, I was protested at one point with like big, huge banners and bullhorns and, yelling at me about, how I'm a traitor for my self-gentrification. And so, no, I don't think that there were some who got it. And, but frankly, I realized that, even though plenty of people did, some didn't. And not everybody was like protesting. Some were just genuinely like triggered. And so we just decided not to use the phrase anymore. Period. And we, changed the name. I mean, I feel like I could call it Sunshine and Lollipops. That I don't really care what it's called, but we now call it talent retention, because that's what it always has been. So the foundation of it is exactly the same. But because it's all about, again, creating the opportunities, for reclaiming our communities, because that's the intent, retain the talent that's already there to improve our own surroundings and our own economic future for ourselves.
I think what you were saying in the book is that when they come into your community and industry, they're going to put in loan offices. They're going to put in fast food joints. They're not looking to put in coffee shops, parks, beautiful community centers, places where people want to go. Young people, why would young people, talent in the Bronx, let's say, want to come back to South Bronx? They want coffee shops and places to hang and music and art. And so what I see that you were trying to do was within your community, bring that and make it available so that people didn't have to leave.
Right. Yeah. I mean, basically, when we surveyed people in our community about why they wanted to leave, and the things that came back were not things that many people would think. It's like, oh, you're from an inner city community, must be the crime. Nobody even mentioned it. Most people were just like, look, I want to have a cool place to hang out in. Like, I want cafes and bookstores and music venues, and that's where I go, to hang out. And basically, at some point, if I'm in a position to live in a place like that, that's where I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, what if we tried building it here? What would happen then? And that's why we did the things we did, which was, we opened up, the first coffee shop, the first cafe our neighborhood had. And since I was in high school here in the 1980s, and I never hung out here. I mean, that was the thing. It was just like, and I was that kid who was just like, I'm so out of here. There's just nothing to keep me here. It's like, why? And now we're hearing very different things, coming from our community. And I'm like, wait, we just had to open up a little coffee shop, at a place that had nothing in it for God knows how long. And suddenly people are seeing people just like themselves here. Because that was another thing, having these third spaces that are neither work nor home, but places where you build community, whether it's a cafe, a bookstore, whatever, it just makes people see like they're not alone. And that, community is not, it's not just a place, it's an activity, but you have to have great places to do it so that people can see like just the beauty of themselves reflected back like through their community. That's really what happens. And when you do stuff like that, and that's why it's so exciting to me to be like, wow, this isn't just, we're just building something for the sake of building it. Like, no, we're building this for the sake, of creating this kind of like human infrastructure that is then going to continue the development of this community.
I was in the Bronx recently. My mom was born and raised in the Bronx on Harrison Avenue, right off the Grand Concourse. And so about just a few months ago, she wanted to go back and see her old apartment building, which I would imagine you and I are the same age. And I think I'm just a few weeks older than you actually. And she left the Bronx about a year before I was born. And then it was a very Jewish, Italian, a lot of immigrants. My family is, Polish immigrants that came through the Lower East Side and then ended up in that area. I think it's called Morris Heights. Is that correct? Morris Heights. And so she wanted to see the neighborhood and asked if I would drive her in there. And I did. One of the things that was interesting to me to see, because I haven't driven in the Bronx in a really long time. And except for the Grand Concourse, which is super wide, a lot of those streets are so narrow. And I'm an excellent driver. And yet, as I was navigating these streets, I thought, man, this is dangerous for the community. I was seeing trucks. I was seeing all sorts of like activity and thinking about the kids, because sometimes people think about the Bronx, if you're not from that area, you just think like apartment building after apartment building, but there are houses.
Right.
And,
that part.
Beautiful houses. And then there's apartment buildings, a lot of families and a lot of kids. And I don't remember if I read it in the book, or if I read it somewhere, but weren't you very active in around truck drivers and something around the safety of children or families? Am I off on something? It's just a memory I'm having.
You're deaf. Actually, when we first met, that's probably exactly what I was working on, which was, I was focused more on project-based development, specifically around environmental development within the community, and working on the kind of, more pedestrian friendly, truck routes was something that we actually worked on, like literally trying to figure out what the routes were so that we can protect people from trucks, let them do their work, but not necessarily like within a community, where there were children and some of them actually did get killed as a result, of it. So no, you're absolutely not imagining it.
All right. It was an interesting thing. As I was driving, I'm looking around thinking, this is old. I said to my mom, I said, do these streets look exactly the way they did when you were a kid? And she was like, absolutely. But of course they would, because they were designed for the cars or whatever it was at that time. And haven't changed.
No, I'm sorry. I just had to like look really quickly to see like where is Harrison up there? Yes, on the West Bronx. So I had to just check it because I'm like, I was like, I know Harris, but not Harrison. But yeah, again, that's another part where it's just like we haven't, like, we did a lot of work over in my neck of the woods. We really did, because it was seriously challenging. But again, it's like that level of activism has to happen everywhere. And if we're not consistently going, no, or not even saying no, because like no one likes that, but just like, hey, this is an idea, we can do this, so that everyone can actually, so that trucks and commerce could happen the way that it's supposed to, but not at the expense of the people.
Right. All right. Thank you, Majora, for answering that. I know that I only have a few minutes left before I'm going to be taking questions, but there's it would only make sense for me to ask this question because of the work that I do in yoga and as a spiritualist. You start off your book talking about prayer and hope as being action words, which I agree 100%. And you also, towards the end of the book, you give a couple of quotes from, I believe, the gospel, from the New Testament, I think. And so clearly your spiritual practice is very, very important in the work that you do. And which is, I imagine, what gets you up in the morning, which keeps you going even when you are taking emotional hits, because it's not about you. Absolutely. You know that you're in service to something bigger, you're being used, and you have an obligation to lean into that and not let your ego determine the choices that you make, even though that's hard. That's something that you lay on your friends or your partner to help to support you, but it doesn't stop you from doing the work that you do. Yes. I thought it was really interesting. Let me see if I can find what it was. Oh, you wrote, when you grow up in a low status community, an inferiority complex is backed into your psyche by everything around you. Both subtle and overt messages tell you will never measure up. And one way or another, you believe them. And which I thought, like, just talking about the shadow of why this happens, the trauma that lives in the individual and in the collective. If you get told that you're not worthy enough, then you don't expect anything. You don't even want anything. And nor, though, and I think this is where I want to ask you, that's your comfort zone. It's what you know. So can you explain how that belief system enforces communities' unwillingness to change or grow? Because as you say in one of the chapters, it's, quote, the devil you know. Because it's true. If you know what's familiar, you can stay safe in that familiarity, but change in communities where there's trauma can literally equal death. It can literally. And here you come in saying, let's change. And I can imagine it's not just community organizers or other like capitalists or coming in, other real estate developers saying, don't do this. But I would imagine it's the mamas and the papas within your own community, your family and friends who are saying to you, stop, you're going to put us in danger. And so I'm wondering if you can speak for a moment on that and how your spiritual practice keeps you moving forward.
Yeah, no, I have experienced all that in some way, shape, or form, and it's in the book and different pieces of it. But if my God tells me that like everything is winnowed down to like two things: love God, love your neighbor the way God loved you. It has to be this thing where it's just like because we can see like what is actually spiritual and, the kind of traumatic death, the slow violence that happens in communities, in low status communities, when we see the stats, so we know they're not getting better. So for me to look at like what hasn't worked and go, don't do that. Let's try something else. That is the manifestation of my love letter, to the community. And and communities like it, and the hope that others will be able to see, like, no, like, we have the power to do something here. It doesn't mean everybody's going to, start a park or a cafe or whatever, but but everybody has the capacity to, like, look at their own hometown and see value in it, where we've been led to believe that there wasn't any. And that is also, I think, a spiritual practice. Like, as if we are letting, the shadows that we are, I mean, it's like, I do think it's a demonic force when we start to believe those awful things about ourselves that keep us from being the beautiful spiritual beings that we all are. Like that, I absolutely, no doubt about it. And, having been someone who's also kind of succumbed to that, at certain points in my own life, it's like, I'm just saying it because, like, I know it to be true. But I feel so strongly that if I can show that, someone like me can do this and live, then anybody can. So that's why it's like being an example is so important. But I've also gotten, what is also like the best part about all this is knowing that there are folks that my example has actually bolstered, not just them up to do the work, but I get that love right back.
Yeah.
I get so much of it back that it's just sort of like, I kind of forget half the time, like the really crappy things that have happened, because there've been so many folks who've just been like, I get it. Oh God, I get it. And I didn't know this was possible, but I'm going to go do this on my own now. And that's what's so beautiful.
Majora, do you see a lot of evidence of people in your community staying and now really thriving in that environment? Are you seeing evidence? Yeah.
In my own and then around the country. That's what's so beautiful. Like literally, I just got a call the other night from a person I'd met, not fairly recently, who like, and let me tell you, I do not do well talking like after like 10 o'clock at night. I'm just like, I can't. But anyway, so she called like 10 o'clock at night, and I was like, I didn't even know she had my number, but she did. And she called because she'd like got my book and just happened to read it, like literally when she was in that 3-day waiting period, when she had been approached by some, an investor group, the predatory speculators that, recognize that there's value in our communities before we do, and we sell off early and cheap, people like that. And she was, so they offered her what she thought was an okay price. And then she read my book literally in one sitting and was just like, oh my God, I was literally about to give away my child's inheritance. And that's when she stopped the sale, literally stopped the sale, and is holding on to that property so she can engage in the act of generational wealth for her family.
That makes me so happy to hear, like truly, especially as a woman. I'm glad to know, like truly, that she was not manipulated, didn't get that scarcity, that fear of like, oh, this might be the only opportunity I have to get some money now, rather than realizing like, actually, I'm sitting on something here. I'm going to be patient, and this is going to support generations to come. Yes. So it makes me very happy. It's like, yes. Yeah. Good.
Exactly. That's now, how I feel. That's why I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm tired, but thank you God for those little love notes, because I got it.
Yeah. I want to go over to the group here. And again, thank everybody for being here and being a part of this conversation. And for the rest of the time, now I would love to open up the floor to anyone who has any questions. So if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat, or if you feel like saying hi to me and Majora, you can go to that little icon, the reactions. And I think there's a little hand that you can put up like in the corner. So go ahead and do that. Someone's asking me if those are dragon eggs on the right side. Right there. Yes, those are dragon eggs. No, those are selenite. Those are selenite crystal balls. They were in honor of the full moon, so I have them right behind me as my practice space, and so they were on my little altar. But I like the idea. Tracy, I saw your hand. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. So, hi, Tracy.
Hi. So great to be here. This is a beautiful conversation, and I actually didn't know about your work before, Majora. So this is beautiful. I'm going to check out your TED Talk and your book.
Thanks.
And but the thing that always comes up for me in hearing stories like this is like, how do we contribute? How can we support, what you're doing? How can we support, the change?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the next, so who's the we? I just want to make sure I'm talking.
We, meaning like individuals who care.
Okay, so I mean, I'll just keep it broad. So if you're in one of these in a low status community, then support the folks that are out there trying to do this, like a talent retention strategy. And I believe me, I talk in my book about, because it looks different in different places wherever you are. As I because kind of some of the examples, obviously my own community, but then there's other ones like in Philadelphia where Ken Weinstein is helping to support the young developers of color to actually be people who are getting loans to them so that they can actually do that work. Up in Alaska, my friend Dune Lankard from the EAC Nation is actually working to develop a kelp sustainable kelp farming initiative, because it's got like incredible industrial applications that can literally be an economic driver to support tons of natives up in the Alaska region, and just all of these kind of things. So support the folks that are out there actually doing the work and trying to do it locally. I think that is the best practice that we can take. Even if you're not actually the ones doing the work, support those that are actually out there doing it. Because the thing is, like, to Sean's point earlier about being the canary, or me being the canary, it's true. The impact of like folks that who hate what you're doing is so much louder than those who actually appreciate what you're doing. And the people who appreciate it, they need to be a little more vocal, and because that would be helpful.
Yeah,
I promise you. Yeah, people would love it.
Cool. I was thinking about, I was just thinking about all the things that, anything that I could do to support. But yeah, I don't like right now, I don't know communities who are in this process. Is there a resource where we can find that out? And then I also was thinking about just different things, like you were talking about, actually, Sean, you were talking about the mindset piece, and that's the work that I do. And so, is there some way I can contribute some sort of, program to help people shift mindset, things like that. Those are some of the thoughts. And then I'm also very involved with permaculture, and, it sounds like, on the ground, there's some, opportunities to create things like that where people can, start growing their own food. Anyway, those are just some ideas were coming through.
Tracy, thank you. I would imagine that there's some resource pages. Majora, I don't know if you were the co-founder of Green for All, but yes. I wonder if Green for All, I don't even know does Green for All still exist as an organization?
I'm not clear.
I'm not clear either. The truth. But there are a lot of resources. What's really important, I always think, is don't try to reinvent the wheel. Odds are someone is already doing it. And it's a matter of just going and finding in your community who are already leaders and seeing what they need. You might have skills. When we started Off the Mat into the World, one of our most treasured people that we worked with was someone who loved to do spreadsheets. That was what she loved to do and was great at. And her service was extraordinary because we were visionaries. We didn't know that stuff. And so no skill is insignificant, but someone is probably already doing what you want to do. And you might want to just like align yourself and see like, hey, here's what I got. How can I help? How can I support? So thank you, Tracy. There's a question in the chat, and then I'm going to go to you, Dr. Joe, and then you, Chris. Annie, you said, what is the most effective action an individual can take in their own community? Annie lives in San Francisco.
Yeah, I think Sean's advice, just like looking where you are, and seeing what the folks that are there need. If you're not the one doing that work already, then find those that you can support and offer up something that they need to make their lives a lot easier. I think that is just really sage advice. And then there's also, I think, as far as we do include a discussion guide, like in the back of our book, which is just basically whether, and it's for a whole bunch of different types of folks, whether you live in low status communities or want to be people who want to be supportive.
Chris, I'm going to take you, and then I'm going to jump to a couple of questions on the chat. So go ahead, Chris. Hi to you.
Froze with the Dragon AIDS question. I didn't know how to respond, but my real question is, as a teacher, as aspiring like artist myself, all teachers are artists. You got activists, whatever you want to call them. Like, how do you take care of yourself, like self-care, like when, you don't necessarily like the spotlight, but the spotlight's on you?
Is that question, Chris? Are you asking me?
Either of you. Yeah.
Well, I can only answer it for myself. And I will tell you that I've been in therapy since I was 18 years old. And when I became a teacher and became someone who was more in the public eye and started to hold projection, and it's uncomfortable and it's painful and there's all that stuff. And I doubled down on my therapy and made sure that I had an enormous amount of support. So two things: one, that I didn't buy the hype, and also that I didn't buy into the negativity, because neither are true. And if I buy into one, I'm going to buy into the other. So making sure that I have a place where I can process, cry, rage, scream, deal with the projection as a part of the growth. Always remembering that, like Majora, that this is a God thing that I'm personally very committed to, and that I'm also a human being with hopes, faults, and graces. And that without support, I could easily fall back into my own trauma and limiting beliefs. And if I get caught up in the projection of others and take it personally, then what I will do is try to micromanage my conversation to make each person like me. And it's not sustainable. And it's not true. It's not going to happen. It won't work. So to me, the more you're committed to being in the public eye and to having a voice that might often be controversial, you got to make sure you have a good group of friends, that you've got people to talk to, and probably a professional to walk you through it, who understands this level of shadow work.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. And for someone I'm a natural introvert, period. Like, I would prefer not talking. I mean, I love like small groups of people. Like, actually, this kind of stuff is fine for me. But it takes a lot out of me. But to Sean's point, it's like, if I didn't know that this was something bigger than me, it would be real. Then it becomes this thing that I'm performing. And it's just like, no, it's not really. It's really not. It's like, this has so little to do with me. I mean, I'm a vessel, and I am grateful. Like, you don't even know how grateful I am that I get to live out like some of the fruits of the spirit, joy, compassion, love. I mean, it's just like, wow, I get to do this. Like, this body gets to do that. Amen. But it's so much bigger than I am. But that's why I have to keep going back to the fact that it's like, there's someone holding me as I'm used to do this, because otherwise I would not be doing it. I can tell you that, like, point blank.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm building my support network right now. So, thank you for answering that deep question.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate that question. It's a good one.
Yeah, I was a little vulnerable saying that.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to these two questions in the chat. This is from Barbara Caldwell. I also live in an area that could fall into low status community, an upstate New York, former manufacturing town. As part of a social justice education master's, I undertook a storytelling initiative to capture the stories of 30-somethings returning home to raise their families. It was an inspirational undertaking. I have put the project on hold until I have completed the master's, but I'm looking forward to getting back to it. Okay, Barbara, so I'm sorry, I thought it was a question. It's not a question, but I'm glad to hear that this is the work that you're doing, and that I get that why you put it on hold, but I'm also looking forward to you going back, Barbara. I see you, Barbara. I look forward to you going back when you're ready and completing that, because for you to write it out now, it means that it's still pulling at you. You know, it's a part of your overall vision. So Barbara, I hope it happens sooner than later. And congratulations about going back and getting your master's.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. And this is also from Barbara Harrison. I currently work with the single payer movement. I'm sorry. God, there's a lot of Barbaras. It's the same Barbara. Barbara Harrison. Hello, Majora. We have spoken on the phone and met a number of times. Thanks for the time that you have given me. And thanks so much for the work that you do and the commitment to keeping on. I am looking into working with the pro-social world. I have found it difficult. I think, and dissatisfying working with the single payer movements. They are lacking in the desire to reach out to marginalized communities. And then I think it extended into, Barbara, I think you extended it over here. The single payer movement is more interested in cheering themselves on rather than reaching across cultural, class, and ethnic boundaries. I don't know how much longer I will continue to work with one payer states. It's like banging my head against the wall. They just don't get that it's important for those who don't have broadband and people in general that we have human contacts. Majora, I'm not 100% sure what Barbara is referring to, but it sounds like you have I don't know
all of the. I just want to say thank you, because it is banging your head up against the wall, because I think we've talked about that a lot, and it doesn't end. But the fact that you're still out there doing it and actually raising the issues that you continue to raise, that's the work. So thank you for doing that, and really just appreciate all that you've been up to.
Soyuz, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sebastian Olakun. It just comes up as Soyo's iPhone. That's what I've called my phone. But I just wanted to say that, Majora, I live in a low status neighborhood. I live in Jersey City, the Greenville section of Jersey City, and it is low status. I grew up like you, wanting, my whole intention was to leave. But 3 years ago now, I actually bought the house that I grew up in.
Yay!
And so I am, I'm committed to staying here. And I learned of you maybe 7 years ago. I came to the cafe. I drove in rush hour traffic getting over there. And just because I wanted to hear you speak, I learned of you and your quote about not having to leave your neighborhood. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you. I am starting the work here in my neighborhood. And in fact, I bought 12 copies of your book. So I will be in touch with your people to set up a time for you to meet with the group the curated group that I'm assembling, because
I'm so happy.
It is, I mean, really, and I intend to do a bookstore. I intend to encourage people to do cafes. I intend to make Greenville the place where we retain attention, retain our talent.
Yes.
Because we're losing it and we're losing the battle. And so just thank you so much. I will be in touch with your people. They've sent me an email actually. So, and thank you for hosting this talk. I mean, I saw it, and whenever Majora is talking anywhere, I'm like, oh no, let me sign up. So anyway, I'm grateful for this talk. Your questions were amazing. It really helped me to think about things in a different way. So I really appreciate this platform. Thank you very much. God bless y'all.
Thank you.
Blessings.
And God bless you as well. I feel like you just bared witness to an intention being made in the moment. She made such a strong declaration. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And I was like, okay, we're witnessing. So thank you for that. That was very exciting. All right, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. You can get in touch with Majora at majoracartergroup.com. And also on the chat, there's a link for the book giveaway. So please take advantage of that so you can get a book. More important though, if you can, buy 1, buy 12, give them to your friends. It's a really important book. And I'm so grateful to have been given the opportunity to have read this. And even more, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have this kind of conversation with you, Majora. I learned a lot reading your book and being in this dialogue. And I'm so grateful for the relationship. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. And just one quick thing, if you buy 10 or more, just 10 or more copies, or a group of your friends do, before March 1st, just as Soya said before, I actually can zoom into your book group or your organization's group, and we could just, as part of like an author talk. So happy to do that. And it doesn't have to happen before March 1st. We can, we have till the end of the year, a time that's convenient for both of us so that I can do that. Or I might be in touch with you in person, depending, God willing, and COVID is not like too crazy.
Majora and Sean, thank you so much for this wonderful gift and incredible work. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everybody.